Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Uygur, Annika Sparin with you guys on a very calm, balanced afternoon.
Super calm, super balanced.
That's what we're all about today. Okay.
That's the motto here at TYT: calm and balanced.
we were wondering, home of progressives or just calm and balanced?
How boring would a calm and balanced show be? Well, I mean, we are actually pretty balanced. We're fair. We're fair.
Yeah.
We're not calm.
No, we are not calm. No,
but some people love the fake calm, right?
Yeah.
Like especially the left. Like let's keep it real. The left loves hush tones. Like hush tones mean that the person is reasonable and logical, even if what they're saying is insane. Yeah. And it's like, don't be fooled by that. Passion is okay.
Yes. So Amy Goodman, good calm. NPR, fake calm, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a ticket.
All right. So, anyways, here's some balance for you guys. We're gonna hit Democrats first and Republicans second, because you know why? Because they deserved it. They're in the news and they're doing wrong things. Our job is to point it out. All right. And at the end, by the way, we will trigger right wingers and fake fall left wingers. By talking about Russia.
It's faux. It's faux.
I do it wrong every time. What did I say? What did I say again?
Just faux. Just think of friends and foes.
Faux. What do I say?
Faux. Yeah, it's faux.
What a weird mental and verbal glitch. Okay. Anyways, Russia later. No. Okay. Seriously, let's get started with the important stuff.
All right, let's do it.
You want to get a picture of us? Get a picture of us, huh? We're talking. All right, we're talking.
You're going to have a resolution by the end of the week, it sounds like?
We're talking. We're going to make some progress.
Senator Sanders, you prepared to make some deep cuts to climate change and other things like that?
Senators Bernie Sanders and Joe Manchin got together for a meeting to negotiate the budget reconciliation bill, the same budget reconciliation bill that conservative Democrat Joe Manchin has been a massive obstacle in getting passed. Now, Manchin clearly in that video was pretty desperate for a photo op with Bernie Sanders. And at first I was a little confused about why, but then I took a look at what the constituents over in West Virginia and Bernie Sanders happens to be one of the people that the constituents there love. In fact, if you look at the Democratic primary in 2016, Bernie Sanders did quite well with the Democratic electorate. 51.4% of Democrats favored Sanders over Hillary Clinton in 2016. Now in the 2020 election, by the time West Virginia held its primary, Biden was the only candidate. So there you have it. But let's get back to the budget reconciliation bill and what's taking place. As we shared with you earlier this week, over the weekend, Senator Bernie Sanders wrote an op-ed pressuring Manchin to support the budget reconciliation bill, and he published it in West Virginia's largest newspaper. He wrote the following: poll after poll shows overwhelming support for this legislation, yet the political problem we face is that in a 50-50 Senate, we need every Democratic senator to vote yes. We now have only 48. 2 Democratic senators remain in opposition, including Senator Joe Manchin. Now that triggered Joe Manchin, who then released his own statement in response on Twitter, arguing this isn't the first time an out-of-stater has tried to tell West Virginians what is best for them, despite having no relationship to our state. Senator Sanders' answer is to throw more money on an already overheated economy, while 52 other senators have grave concerns about this approach. The bill would be paid for by increasing taxes, as we all know. To be clear, again, Congress should proceed with caution on any additional spending, and I will not vote for a reckless expansion of government programs. No op-ed from a self-declared independent socialist is going to change that. And real quick, Cenk, before I go to you, I just want to note that Bernie, as he usually is correct. Let's take a look at how West Virginians feel about the budget reconciliation bill. When the nonpartisan, nonprofit Work Money surveyed more than 50,000 of its 2 million members nationwide, it found that 81% of respondents said they supported this plan. That includes 90% of liberals who took the survey, 81% of moderates, and 66% of conservatives. Now let's take a look at West Virginia. This should be relevant to Senator Manchin. 80% of respondents in West Virginia believe Manchin should vote to pass the bill. That includes 77% of conservatives who responded to the survey.
Yeah, so a lot of this is about optics, and then I'll tell you what the reality is. So on the optics front, Bernie Sanders put the op-ed in the West Virginia newspaper to obviously rattle Manchin's cage, and it did rattle it to some extent. Why, you might wonder? What's the big deal about a local newspaper that no one reads? Well, in the old days, everybody used to read the local papers, and local media is worth way more than national media, especially in the old days. And remember, all of our politicians are in their 70s or older, so they still believe in the old adage from Tip O'Neill, all politics is local. So when an old school politician like Joe Manchin sees an op-ed from a different senator, especially from his own party, in his local paper, he thinks that's a shot across the bow in a massive way, right? So they're like, whoa, wait a minute, now we're getting into real open warfare here. Now the reality is, that's not really how media works anymore. More people watch cable news, more people go on Facebook than they read any local newspaper by a order of magnitude, right? But the old senators have not caught on to that at all. So now the second portion of this is also optics. So they have the meeting. Apparently they didn't make very much progress at all. And afterwards, Manchin demands a photo op, as you saw there in the video. Now, why is he doing that? He just said he's an out-of-stater, independent socialist, and et cetera. And if we're in open warfare, no. As Anna pointed out, since Bernie did so well in the primary in 2016, Manchin knows that that is a big chunk of his own voters, the Democratic voters, and he's got to appease them. So being a classic politician, he goes in both directions. Brags about 52 senators, 50 of whom are Republicans that are on his side, or 48 of them are Republicans at least. Or I'm sorry, I keep saying that wrong. 50 are on his side that are Republicans, and then at the same time, he wants to cover his bases with Bernie. So he's got basically his arms around Mitch McConnell and Bernie Sanders. But all of that is optics. There's only one thing he cares about. And a lot of the articles talk about how the White House and Jennifer Granholm and at the Energy Department are making a big pitch about how much this bill would actually help the people of West Virginia. But guys, the jury's already in. 80% of the people of West Virginia want the bill. They think it's gonna help them. You can't get that much better than 80%. That's not gonna move Manchin 1 inch. Bernie's not gonna move him. None of these things are gonna move him. The only thing he cares about is money, 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 period. And in this case, we're really kind of screwed because he's taking out the biggest portion of the fighting back against climate change from the bill. He's saying, that's my red line. I don't want you to fight climate change at all. I don't want you to go towards renewable energies. And it's gonna be super hard to move him, not only because his donors are in that industry, obviously, as we've shown you in the past, but his own company that he founded, his son runs, that he gets money from, $500,000 every year, is in coal. So moving away from coal is devastating. I mean, he's already incredibly wealthy, but he would perceive it as devastating to his personal income and his personal wealth. So how are you gonna move a senator that deeply corrupt? Well, that jury's still out.
I think that there's still a possibility to move him, as we've talked about before, because if you look at the entirety of Joe Manchin's political career, even as he's huffing and puffing, even as he's going out of his way to differentiate himself from the Democratic Party, when he's pressured enough and persistently, he does eventually cave, right? The real wild card here, the person that I'm most concerned about in the Senate is Sinema. Because you have the theory that she doesn't know what she's doing at all. My theory is she seems to get some sort of pleasure or a rise out of upsetting her own constituents. She seems to like the negative attention, considering the fact that she's going against the will of her own constituents and supporters. But with that said, I mean, going back to what you said earlier, Cenk, about the op-ed that was written by Bernie and how this is against the rules, like the decorum and what senators are used to. I mean, all I could really think about is the good old days of politics, where you have someone like LBJ, okay, as the head of the Senate, right, Senate Majority Leader. Oh, I mean, he stopped at nothing. He knew when to use carrots, there's no question about that, but he was pretty vicious, and he also knew how to wield power. He knew how to coerce and intimidate, and I question whether any of that takes place in Congress anymore.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I just asked on social media earlier in the day, if Manchin and or Sinema prevent us from passing any of these bills, are there gonna be any consequences?
There absolutely should be.
Yeah, I mean, if you kill the president's agenda, there should be nuclear consequences politically. Does Joe Biden even have a single stick in his arsenal, let alone nukes? I mean, I'd be surprised if they got a slap on the hand. So
Joe Biden is giving them a lot of what they want. So for instance, Biden, who at first was standing firm on the $3.5 trillion price tag, which again would be paid for through common sense tax increases on the rich. Now he's saying, okay, maybe we go down to $2 trillion, right? Remember, Manchin said his red line was 1.5 trillion. I wouldn't be surprised if Biden eventually falls in that number, close to that number.
No, they're gonna go around 2 for sure.
Okay, whatever. But what has Biden also just said? He's considering doing away with a massive renewable energy provision in the bill.
So that's my point, guys. So you can get to whatever number that Manchin and Biden are comfortable with. None of us will be comfortable with it, and it'll probably be around 2. But the question is, what's in the 2? And so Manchin is specifically saying that I don't want you to fight climate change. The provisions that are about climate change, I want you to take them out. Period. I'm in coal. I don't care about your stupid planet. I still got money to make. My kids got money to make, and so we're gonna. It's our red line. Now that's a giant problem, and honestly, on that one, I don't know how they're going to move him off of it. He has to move off of it, otherwise they're not going to get any. But guys, there's more. But there's also good news in a sense, because other senators, not just Bernie, like all of a sudden the other 47 Democratic senators showed up. All we had was Manchin, Sinema, and Bernie, right? On the 2 different sides. The other 47 usually don't do anything anyway, right? But now all of a sudden, Tina Smith, Sheldon Whitehouse, Merkley are all rising up, Ed Markey, rising up and going, no, if you take out the things that fight against climate change, our voters are demanding it, absolutely positively, especially Ed Markey, who won based on that platform in Massachusetts. And then we're gonna vote no, which is, I've never seen a corporate Democrat, some of them are a little bit more progressive, but corporate Democrats say, no, I'm voting no if you don't give us what our constituents want. Normally they don't care at all what their constituents want. But Ed Markey saw in his election, he would not have gotten elected if it was not for the progressive vote, period. There's no question about that. Now we've affected their power. So this is much more complicated than the old days where Manchin would have steamrolled everybody and Biden would have been his willing partner in that. Now it's just a little bit more give and take here. Last thing for me that's super important. In West Virginia, all this hubbub is not about the jobs. Everything you hear from corporate Democrats and corporate media, almost everything is a lie. Only 3% of the jobs in West Virginia are coal jobs, 3%. No, this is about Manchin's profits and donors, period.
All right, let me also just get to one other note in this story. So CNN caught up with Bernie Sanders and wanted to ask him about the op-ed that he wrote urging Manchin to support the budget reconciliation bill. Now, of course, that was meant to apply pressure on Manchin. It was published in the largest newspaper in West Virginia. And here's where CNN's mind is at. Tells you everything you need to know about them. A CNN reporter asked Sanders on Monday night if he apologized to Manchin for his op-ed during their closed-door meeting. Sanders, who had been walking with a group of reporters, briefly came to a halt before asking the right question. Did you apologize for the article you wrote? Why would you ask me that? No, what was that? What was the framing of that question? Yeah. That was so, why would he apologize for writing an op-ed that's correct? That actually illustrates the desires, the demands of Manchin's own constituents, the very desires and demands that Manchin himself, as a senator from that state, is completely ignoring based on his own personal financial incentives. Why would Bernie, of all people, need to do any apologizing whatsoever? How pathetic is that question?
So guys, it's not about one simple question and about one random reporter. It is the mindset of the media in Washington. Progressives must always apologize. You're never allowed to criticize another Democrat as long as they're a right-wing Democrat. Progressives you can attack anytime you want. I've never seen a conservative Democrat, a moderate Democrat, or a Democratic leadership ever be asked to apologize to a progressive. Literally never in my life. Never in my life have I seen that. But the minute a progressive says, I don't agree with a conservative Democrat, they're like, have you apologized yet? Like, honestly, how does it even occur to him to ask that question unless the mindset is, and his editors think, and everybody in the building thinks, how dare a progressive disagree with a corporate Democrat? He must bow his head and giving offense to another senator. He's among the elites. How can you give offense to the elites? I mean, the provision he would take out would probably wind up in the deaths of tons of people in extreme weather events, let alone endangering the entire planet. But no one at CNN or in the club or among the elites gives a damn about that. But they're like, whoa, did you offend another senator by even stating your opinion, your dirty progressive opinion? Well, CNN and the rest of the national media disapprove, and they would like your apology right away.
Did you apologize to Joe Manchin for wanting to represent the best interests of West Virginians better than he does? Did you apologize to Senator Manchin for that? It's pathetic. Anyway, we got to take a break. Let's do that, and when we come back, more progressives are fighting back, and they're doing so vocally on CNN. We'll show you some of those clips and more when we return.
Let's go to the member comments. Dirge writes in, Democrats should tell Manchin they will take all climate-related things out of the bill if Manchin and his family all divest from any coal interests for the next 10 years. Obviously that doesn't get the job done, and I know that you're making a rhetorical statement, but the reason why it's a good comment is because they would find that to be the most offensive thing that has ever happened in Washington. If Bernie had mentioned in that op-ed in West Virginia that Manchin is personally invested in coal, everybody's head would have exploded. Everybody would have demanded that he get on his hands and knees and grovel to Manchin an apology. You have offended one of the elites. They genuinely believe it. And by the way, Bernie didn't put that in the article.
Dude, honestly, as a member of Congress, that is all I would do. That's all I would do. I would spend all of my time. I would do a show for free, okay? I would do this show, but on my own as a member of Congress for free to everybody, and just call out the corruption, call out the insider trading that happens among members of Congress, all of that stuff. They all deserve to be called out. I don't care about their hurt little feelings.
Well, that's
sick of this.
Anna, that's literally why I ran for Congress, right? And what happened? The mainstream media, LA Times editorial board, as we talked about on Old School last night, came in and said, no, Cenk would be uncivil. He would hurt the feelings of the other elites.
That's like, not verbatim, but in essence what they said. We agree with him on the issue. He's correct on the issues, but he's a little too bombastic for our taste. Okay.
We prefer civility in Congress where you never tell the truth. They prefer civility to reality. That's mainstream media. And then I'm sure if they had an opportunity, would ask Bernie to apologize for existing. As they certainly asked me to apologize for existing, and then they asked Bernie to apologize for me existing. So that's how the piece of crap that mainstream media like LA Times is. Anyway, Gabby Merida says, if we really want to reach Manchin, maybe someone should write an aggressively titled op-ed in Gilded House, Yacht Quarterly. That's really funny. We were in a mad mood, but Gabby, that's hilarious. Colorado Blue Blazer Regular says, I think the economy will overheat when climate change scorches the planet. Joy writes in, Congress using the stick, oh yes, against progressives. Rich Thurman says, New York Times reported in 2017 that more people work at Arby's than the coal industry, even less today.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. It's all a mirage. Daniel Lee, by the way, just subscribe by hitting the join button below on YouTube. We love you for it. All right, back on TYT, Jen and Anna with you guys, a lot more news.
All right, let's talk about how progressives are fighting back. Nina Turner went on CNN to make a strong case in favor of passing the budget reconciliation bill, which of course would overwhelmingly improve Americans' lives materially, offering universal pre-K, paid family leave, 2 years of free community college. I mean, the list goes on and on, expanded Medicare. And what I love about Nina Turner is how she comes in strong and she does not let up. Here's a perfect example of that.
I am glad that Senator Sanders had the courage to smoke out Senator Manchin by writing that op-ed, forcing him to have this conversation. So conversation is always good, but it just can't go on forever. Because Brianna, the longer they are in talks, the less likelihood we're gonna have the strong package that is needed to elevate and to uplift the American people who need it the most. And this cannot be pushed down the road because we don't know what may happen in 2022. So we need to get this done right now.
Frankly, I think Manchin is more progressive than he gets credit for, and I think Bernie is more pragmatic. I love that these two guys are talking.
All right, Senator Turner,
Brianna,
progressives,
Brianna,
what? Sorry, go on.
The labels, I mean, I'm so sorry. Pragmatic, practical. People are literally losing their lives and their livelihoods while people play games.
I loved that final moment in that clip. How exactly can anyone claim that Joe Manchin of all people is progressive?
Yeah, if you watch the whole thing, Begala, of course, in that clip, Begala looks like he's giving a little bit of credit to Bernie for being practical, but he's giving Manchin credit for being progressive. I haven't seen it. I've never seen what he's talking about. But overall, in the longer clip, Begala, of course, sides with. We can't have perfection here get in the way. That's the talking point they use every single time when it's progressives asking for something for you guys. Now, when it was a $2 trillion tax cut for the rich, the Democrats pretended to be against it. But was there a big giant fight in the country and in politics and in media? And hey, we got to compromise here. You can't ask for the whole $2 trillion for everything for the rich. Yeah, all right, let's get started a trillion or half a trillion or. No, there was no such fight. They said 2 trillion, they did 2 trillion. There wasn't even a peep out of anybody. It got steamrolled, right? But whenever we're asking for something for you guys, healthcare, climate change, etc., they're like, hey, you can't ask for that much.
We gotta be practical. Yeah. We gotta be practical. And isn't it so convenient that practical is always meant to serve the interests of corporate donors? That's what practical really means. So I love that Nina Turner immediately squashed those ridiculous labels, especially in regard to Joe Manchin. One more clip from her appearance on CNN, and then later we're gonna get to Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, other progressives who are just killing it in their cable news interviews, advocating for the passage of this bill. Let's watch Nina Turner.
And look, the overwhelming majority of West Virginians agree with this. West Virginia is one of the poorest states in the United States of America, and you have a senator who is set for the rest of his natural life, and so are his children and his children's children, and he wanted to negotiate away. Senator Manchin, what do you want to negotiate away? Is it child care? Is it the implosion of Mother Earth? Is it health care? What is it, Brianna? He is not saying what it is. So this is not about who's pragmatic and who's practical and who's progressive. This really is about, in this moment, whose side you are on. And let the American people remember this. $6 trillion was the original number. We are down to $3.5 trillion. How low are we going to go to sacrifice the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class in the United States of America? Hell, the Senate just gave, I think, what, $10 billion more dollars to the military budget than what was asked for?
She's right. In the next decade, the United States is going to spend a minimum of $7.5 trillion on the defense budget. The media never frames it that way. The media only frames the budget reconciliation bill as a $3.5 trillion spending plan. But when it comes to defense, they'll find ways to frame it as if we're not spending a giant portion of our discretionary budget on wars.
Yeah, I'm gonna make one quick note about TYT here and what we're standing for. So Nina Turner's a host on TYT now. She's on Damage Report earlier today. She's gonna be on Indisputable. She's got Power Hour. That's just for our members. But normally when someone signs a contract with a company, it's exclusive and you're not allowed to go on other channels. We did not do that because we think Nina's voice is so important to the country that we want her on everywhere. So thank you to our members that allow us to do that so we can get our incredibly strong voice out to as many people as possible.
All right, so I want to move on to Cori Bush. Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman also had appearances on CNN. They gave their interviews together, and I thought that they absolutely did a great job, including Cori Bush in this moment, where she talks about how she got elected to Congress for a very specific purpose. Let's watch.
The expectation is we will give you crumbs and expect you to be happy. What we're saying is I didn't come to Congress to continue to give crumbs to my community. St. Louis continues to get crumbs and we keep being number one for homicide, number one or number two for homicides, number one for police murder, number one for the murder of children. We keep having those issues. We keep having issues with black children being 10 times as likely to go to the hospital in emergency room for asthma than white children. How do we fix those things? You have to put the money there. And so I didn't come to Congress to sit back and accept those crumbs. Give my folks the meal.
I mean, is there really any other way to put it?
Yeah, no, I love it. That's just Democrats 2.0 right there. Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush, a lot of you guys helped to make sure that they won. And so we're trying to bring positive change in the world. And both of them did a fantastic job. You'll see more clips in a second. But now finally progressives are allowed on air, number one. Why? Because they have credibility. They won the races, they're US Congress people now.
Because they have leverage.
Yeah, and
that's what they have.
Exactly, they have enough votes to block the bill, they have power, then they're allowed on television. Back when we didn't have any power, progressives were persona non grata on television. They were not allowed on TV. Now that, of course, Nina's here, but also former campaign co-chair of Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders is super relevant in the Senate, so they need these voices on. So, and now when they're on, the television audience, for the first time in their lives probably, are hearing a progressive perspective. Yeah, wait, why did the voters have to get crumbs and the donors get to have the full meal?
Exactly. And look, what it does is it creates the same distrust in our institutions that's really hurting the country during this pandemic, right? People campaign, candidates campaign on very specific policy issues. They have specific platforms that call out to the needs of their own constituents. And then they get elected into the system that overwhelmingly prioritizes the interests of corporate donors over the constituents' needs. And progressives have been beaten down with this talking point of be practical, be practical, be practical. Well, isn't it much more practical to serve your constituents? That's the practical way to go about it. But that's not what you're gonna hear in corporate media, which again, tries to beat down progressives, tries to beat them to submission, so they just go along with what corrupt corporate Democrats like Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are demanding. Now, speaking of Joe Manchin, you're gonna love this clip because Jamal Bowman called out Manchin's real interests here. Let's watch.
Joe Manchin and others like him have a certain perspective that I think is incorrect. He thinks investing in a bottom-up economy is entitlement. He claims he's worried about inflation. But I think we need to have a conversation about the special interests that support Joe Manchin and many others.
Yes.
And we need to understand that when we invest this way, it's better for the GDP and the economy going forward, but it's also better than for our well-being. When you put money in people's pockets, they spend that money. It creates demand, which creates supply, which creates jobs.
Yeah, he's absolutely right about that. And by the way, listen, it's not just Manchin. I'm hearing all sorts of establishment politicians, both on the left and the right, arguing that the inflation is the main reason why we shouldn't pass most of the provisions in the budget reconciliation bill. They never talk about what is causing the inflation, right? So there are various factors, but two of the main factors, one of which I've talked about on the show quite a bit, the Federal Reserve pumping money into corporations, that's having a huge impact on inflation. But aside from that, think about what's happening with our supply chains right now. Truckers have quit in droves because they're sick of being overworked, they're sick of being abused. And so right now there aren't enough truckers to essentially make this supply chain whole. So if you go to the ports in Los Angeles or in Long Beach, you'll see these shipping containers that have been sitting at the ports for weeks and weeks and weeks. And the reason why they're not moving is because they don't have the truckers to get the products to the people who have ordered them or to the companies that ordered them for their customers or their clients, right? Now, this bill, the budget reconciliation bill, would create regulations that would ensure that people have paid time off, paid family leave, certain benefits that would make their lives a lot easier so they're not so burnt out and not as overwhelmed as they are now. It would overwhelmingly impact the economy in a positive way, but they don't want to get into the nitty-gritty about that. I'm talking about the corporate Democrats here.
Yeah, so I love that Bowman called out Manchin's special interests. And so, by the way, we told you Bush and Bowman would be the best of the lot, and here they are. They're fighting as hard as anyone in Congress. And so, again, thank you for making that happen. Okay, now, if you want to know how to get actual progress, one of the segments that we do on Power Hour with Nina Turner is What Would Nina Do? And in that segment last week, we kind of figured out what Biden could actually do together as we talked it through. He could threaten Manchin's donors. Now that would be real leverage. You got to go to the bosses because Manchin's not actually the boss. Sinema's not actually the boss. The donors are, right? They're just they're the bodyguards for the donors. So if you go to their boss, you go over their head, and Biden says to fossil fuel companies or medical companies or whoever he needs to, drug companies, and says, guys, you're gonna lose all access to the White House, and we're gonna come for you in a real way. This is just, it's not nickel and diming, that's not fair, because there's some real provisions in this bill, right? But this is not as heavy as they can go at all, right? It's a Biden bill. And if I was Biden, I'd say, look, you guys wanna play with fire, we can go for it, right? And as Nina said in that segment, not in the CNN one, but in the TYT one, she learned from a mentor back in the day that you gotta say, there's gonna be blood on the floor. A little bit of mine and a little bit of yours. But trust me that if we go down this road, you're gonna bleed, okay, politically, okay? And if you say that to the donors, if Biden says that to them, that's gonna have credibility, and then they're gonna go tell their errand boy, Manchin, hey, you better make a deal, son, okay? That's how you play hardball. Does Biden have the stomach for it? I would be very, very surprised.
All right, well, let's go to West Virginia, where energy bills have been skyrocketing, and it's because Joe Manchin is allowing that to happen. So, energy bills in the state of West Virginia, where Joe Manchin happens to be a senator, have been rising, the skyrocketing, astronomical energy bills. Why? Well, it's because of the fact that the country overall is moving away from energy sources or fossil fuels like coal and moving toward renewable energy or natural gas. And that has caused a pretty terrible situation for the people of West Virginia, the so-called ratepayers, meaning the people who have to pay their energy bill. Now, the residential electricity rates of Ohio-based American Electric Power's West Virginia subsidiaries have risen 122% over the last 13 years, from an average of $62.46 per month in 2008 to $138 $457 per month in 2021. Okay, so what's going on? Why is their energy bill going up so rapidly? Well, there have been regulations that force coal plants, for instance, to make some updates, for instance, that would lessen the amount of CO2 that's being outputted. Now, as America has largely transitioned away from coal-fired power, West Virginia has thrown its weight behind it. The state is the second largest coal producer in the country, and coal generates nearly 89% of its electricity compared to just 19% nationwide, a steep fall from 1990 when coal powered 52% of US electricity. So coal has actually become more expensive compared to other renewable energy sources or natural gas, for instance. And so the prices for coal have actually gone down. I'm sorry, the price for renewable energy has gone down. The price for coal has gone up, and that cost is transferred over to the people of West Virginia. So AEP's 3 coal-fired power plants in West Virginia are in need of $448 million worth of mandatory upgrades in order to remain federally compliant, causing electricity rates to increase by 3.3% starting in September of 2022. Now, these upgrades would allow the plants to stay open until 2040 rather than being shut down in 2028. Now, understand, it would actually be far cheaper for them to avoid doing those upgrades. Just let those coal power plants just shut down, while taking federal government incentives to switch over to other forms of energy, like renewable energy. But people like Joe Manchin don't want it. Sean O'Leary, a senior researcher at nonprofit and clean energy think tank Ohio River Valley Institute, told CNN the utilities could save ratepayers $317 million by retiring the coal plants in 2028, pointing to AEP's own data showing the cost to keep the plants open until 2040. So why don't they go in that direction? It's because there are local lawmakers in the state of West Virginia who want to keep the system going the way it is. And then of course you have people like Joe Manchin, who's literally personally invested in the coal industry. Last year alone, he made $500,000 off of Enersystems, a company he founded that his son is now in control of. He made $500 million off of that, $500,000 off of that last year alone.
Yeah, so TYT showed that he's made over $5 million from that company alone, at a minimum. Okay, that's the ones we could track publicly. So he's got at least 5 million reasons to want to block the sensible way to go, and one that would actually save taxpayers money. Now, he claims that he wants to save taxpayers money. He says that all the time, never when Republicans are in charge, but when Democrats get in charge and all of a sudden you want to help anybody, all of a sudden he's really worried about the spending. But in this case, well, you're spending more to keep a dying industry afloat, even though it has higher prices. Doesn't make sense in any way, shape, or form until you find out both your contributions, political contributions, and your personal profits both come from coal. So I don't know a person more biased in America than Joe Manchin on this. And guys, have you seen in mainstream media coverage about the $5 million he's made off of his coal company?
Nope.
You've never seen that, right? You've never seen that in mainstream media. Isn't that a weird thing that they never bring up? Something that has got to be a fact. Guys, you know it in your personal life. If you made $5 million from something, you think it might affect you? Of course, you're human, it would affect you, right? And you ask mainstream media, they're like, no. Politicians are so honorable that $5 million in profits would never affect them.
It's insane.
That's not a factor. They don't think it's a relevant factor. That is absolutely insane. Last thing about that particular portion of it, Manchin says in a completely different clip that I saw, oh, well, let the markets do their work. And he's partly referring to what Anna just explained to you, that the prices are going up for coal and they're gonna go out of business anyway.
Let me give you his quote actually, because I have that quote, it's telling. He says, the transition is already happening. So I'm not gonna sit back and let anyone accelerate whatever the market's changes are doing.
Now,
what? So hold on, the market is great when it's working to your advantage, but you reject the market or you try to slow down the direction the market's going in if it doesn't benefit you. That's exactly what he's saying there.
Well, he's saying let the market do whatever it's doing and let's not accelerate it. But wait a minute, the market's not just acting on its own. Coal has subsidies. How is that part of the free market? Well, okay, then if it's part of the free market, why don't we give it to the renewable energies? Well, that's the thing you're holding up. Wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense at all.
Who cares about the market, by the way? The planet is being destroyed. Like, we're spending so much money on a yearly basis to respond to extreme weather events, whether it's floods, wildfires, insane hurricanes in areas where we didn't typically have hurricanes. I mean, you want to talk about fiscal responsibility? This is not fiscally responsible in any way, shape, or form. I don't care what direction the market's going in. Obviously, we're dealing with a real crisis here in regard to the climate emergency, and we have Joe Biden being treated as if he's some sort of honest actor who isn't motivated by his own financial interests.
You said Joe Biden.
I'm sorry, Joe Manchin.
Although,
I misspoke, but also.
Yeah. Okay, so guys, when Louisiana gets hit with a giant hurricane, the people of Louisiana, in a very red state, have to pick up the bill. And the federal government, and hence all of us, have to pick up the bill. This isn't about how much things cost. This is about who pays them. And so Chevron, ExxonMobil, et cetera, and Manchin's coal company, they don't want to pay the bill. They want to take the profits home, and they want to stick the taxpayers with the bill. That's what this is about. And we show it to you with every number, right? We show it to you with statistics. Here, while we're gonna give you another one here about the percentage of people in coal. Like, oh my God, you think 97% of the people in West Virginia work in coal? Oh, because in mainstream media, you always hear, coal, West Virginia's coal. It's Joe Manchin's an honest person who cares about the employees in West Virginia who all work in coal. None of it is true. So we're gonna prove it in a second. But you have to keep wondering why the rest of the media never tells you things that are obvious and an enormous factor. Why do they not tell you that? Why do they keep it hidden from you? It's weird.
So let's take a look at this graph, because the graph breaks down where the jobs are in West Virginia. Relatively few West Virginians work in mining. In fact, coal mining employed around 13,000 people in West Virginia as of 2019, about 3% of the state's workforce. Again, 3% of the state's workforce, and that's down from 120,000 in 1950. Many of those jobs have been lost to automation and the rise of cheaper sources of energy. Like I said, natural gas being one of them. Coal-fired power plants, by the way, meanwhile, directly employ little more than 2,000 people in the state of West Virginia. So all of the talking points that you're either likely to hear from Joe Manchin or you've already heard from Joe Manchin in regard to how important coal is for workers in the state, it's all BS. Again, there's that massive conflict of interest when it comes to his own personal financial incentives. If he's invested in a company related to the coal industry and he's making $500,000 a year off of it, that's what's motivating him. He's not an honest actor. And this isn't just a problem with Joe Manchin. It's a problem with almost every member of Congress. Because remember, every member of Congress can invest in individual stocks. They can make trades based on undisclosed intel, information that we're not privy to as American citizens. This is stuff that happens day in and day out. Those conflicts of interest are there, they're right in front of our faces, and we're all having a discussion about these negotiations as if we're dealing with honest actors. They're not honest actors. The system is fundamentally broken. The incentives are in the wrong place.
And whenever anyone in mainstream media does good reporting, their own network then immediately ignores it, right? So this original story is from CNN. About the woman who's struggling paying her electric bills in West Virginia. They included the graph, et cetera. But I'll give you more numbers on it. I mean, look, back in the old days, a lot of jobs in West Virginia were coal. Back in 1950, 120,000 jobs, when they had a lot less people in West Virginia, were coal jobs. That was the main driving force in West Virginia. But that was 70 years ago, right? So now, in terms of people working directly at the factory, it's only 2,000 people. In overall in the natural resources and mining industry at large, that's where you have 13,000 people. That's it, 13,000 people. That's 3% of the workers in West Virginia. 3%. So now look, if CNN, every time they talk to Manchin, well, I think they just asked Bernie Sanders if he'd apologize to Manchin because he pointed out facts that are true. I mean, look at that insane framing. Read your own articles, right? If every time they talked to Manchin, they said, Senator Manchin, only 3% of the jobs in West Virginia are from coal, 97% is from other things. And this would actually reduce the amount of money that both the federal government pays and West Virginia pays. And it seems like you care more about the $5 million you just made from coal than you do the 3% of the workers of West Virginia. My God, that would change the entire dynamic. Just that one question, if you just asked it once, and then it would create a little storm, like, oh my God, a reporter asked a real question of someone in power. Oh, and then everybody else would ask the reporter to apologize to Manchin for pointing out facts. What is wrong with our media? Why won't they say things that are true? It's infuriating. And at the end of the day, the worst part of it is it affects you. They then do propaganda. They move that bill from 6 trillion to 3.5 trillion, now 2 or maybe 1.5 trillion, or maybe not at all. Why? Because they never effectively called out Manchin for what he's actually doing.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, we'll switch gears and talk a little bit about Donald Trump and his reaction to Colin Powell passing away. We'll be right back.
Let's go to YouTube Super Chat first. British 32 wrote in, hi Cenk and Anna, great show about US corruption. My family have solar panels on the roof and each year we receive a check for, get a load of this guys, 1,500 to 2,000 pounds after paying for usage for the year, but we got the panels with Eco Grant in the UK. Other countries have already moved to renewable energy. They're already saving money. They're saving so much money, they're sending giant checks to their own voters. We can't move at all because Joe Manchin makes money from coal and Sinema likes her fossil fuel checks. By the way, it should be noted, and we don't do this enough, every single Republican is against it. Every single Republican is for corruption. So I don't want to hear any BS from the idiot right wing online who are like, oh yeah, can you believe that? What the Democrats do with corruption? Hey, moron, every single one of your politicians is corrupt. Every one of them. Show me one that'll vote with the American people. Never. They all work for big business. We'll show that later in the show as well. HXC Mike says, this is the most attention mainstream media has given progressives in a decade, and I'm here for it. Even if the framing is still bad, the message is getting out there. I mean, that's how bad the situation is. And you're not wrong. Like when I see progressives on air, I'm like, oh. So, gee, I wonder if mainstream media has actually given you both sides, or if they've given you the corporate side and the lunatic right wing fringe side. So it seems like your only sane option is to go for corporate corruption. Funny how that game is played. Inga Bingy 2000 writes in, Turner being everywhere in turn probably helps traffic to TYT, not accusing you of nefarious intent, just a smart plan. I wish we were that smart. No, it does not help TYT's traffic at all. She's not labeled as TYT, CNN would have a cow. And normally we're the ones who should block that and say, then you can't go on. But we don't, because we're trying to drive positive change in the world and get our progressive message out. That's part of our mission statement, our vision statement. We've been sharing that with you guys in our 20th anniversary. And I know what you guys want. You want her progressive voice as loud and strong in as many places as you can. That's why we're not limiting her. It's more goes to our mission more than it does to any traffic or anything along those lines. If that would be great if it led to traffic, but that's not the situation. But you should check out Power Hour with Nina Turner. That's Thursday night after the main show. It's for members only, tyt.com/join. That's where we come up with all these great ideas, and then she hits them over the head on CNN with them. Now, R. Stone says, I remember in 2016 that the same type of stance that Manchins of the world are doing would be considered obstructionist, selfish, and uncivilized. Where in the world is team unity? Only unity is a talking point to beat up progressives. They never meant it. And they've proven it amply here. Octavio Rodriguez says, Cenk's brain must go to Vietnamese food when he says the word pho and pronounces it pho. Okay, it's a little different. IB writes in, Cenk, thank you and TYT for helping me protect the trans children in my life. Now more than ever, the human species needs compassion for each other and all living things if there's going to be a future. DJ Addy from Twitch. Thank you, we appreciate it. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. And also Paul Redley, he just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. And I'm just gonna read one comment from our members. David Martinez wrote in, mainstream media covered Bernie Sanders' $1 million book sales, but reporting Joe Manchin's $1 million bribes would be uncivil. They do declare. Such a good point. Again, our audience delivers. I wish I'd have thought of that when we were doing the video. Yeah, how come that's fair game, but talking about Manchin's profits is not fair game? It's almost like they're tilted towards the corporate perspective. All right, Casper.
There's a reason why people like Donald Trump. And it's because he bluntly says things that everyone else in the establishment is unwilling to say or just completely covers up. Case in point, his reaction to Colin Powell passing away. Here's what he had to say in a statement that he released. Wonderful to see Colin Powell, who made big mistakes on Iraq and famously so-called weapons of mass destruction, be treated in death so beautifully by the fake news media. Okay, let's just stop right there. No, but like that's what everyone who actually pays attention to US foreign policy was thinking yesterday, right? Like everyone felt the need to maybe pad their critique with some pleasant commentary about him. But no, you look at his career, you look at what he did, you look at the fact that he lied on an international stage, knowingly lied in regard to Iraq and weapons of mass destruction. That alone is bad enough. But then you look at other things from his past, which I'll get into in just a second, and it's just like, yeah, let's stop pretending like he was a perfect guy, he was super moral. Let's be honest about what his career and his legacy entailed. But let me continue. Hope that happens to me someday, Trump says. Honestly, I doubt it, but nonetheless, he also says that Colin Powell was a classic rhino, Republican in name only, if even that, always being the first to attack other Republicans. He made plenty of mistakes, but anyway, may he rest in peace. So he ended it pleasantly at least, right?
Well, not really, but anyway, may he rest in peace.
I know, I was kidding. But look, whether you like or dislike Donald Trump, and I will admit, I obviously dislike Donald Trump quite a bit, this is what appeals to people in regard to like his personality, like the way that he talks about things and he does it bluntly without tiptoeing around obvious facts.
Yeah, there's two different parts of it. One is that the elites are scandalized by plain talk, right? And they're scandalized by anyone who doesn't revere the professional class. And so Colin Powell was a shining example of the Washington professional class. And so it offends them personally if Colin Powell is ever insulted. John McCain was another example of that. Now they're both Republicans, both giant war hawks, and in Washington, beloved. Not beloved in Iraq, not beloved in Afghanistan or Syria or in many other parts of the world, but in Washington, among the elites, they love Colin Powell. Now, the second half of it, though.
Can I just give you a quick example? I mean, Maggie Haberman, a New York Times reporter, quote tweeted Trump's statement and she was incensed, right? Like, I'm paraphrasing, but something along the lines of, his mother, never told him, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it, like that kind of thing. But no, are we gonna have a discussion about the former Secretary of State's legacy? Right? Or are we just gonna pretend like he was a perfect person who never did anything wrong? He took part in war crimes that led to the massacre, the murder, the death of hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million civilians in Iraq. That's nuts.
Yeah, and so Maggie Haberman's saying, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. Well, then you might not be a reporter. I mean, that's not what reporters are supposed to do. But that is the unofficial rule that she lets slip through mother said BS. You're a reporter for the New York Times. What do you mean if you have nothing nice to say, you shouldn't report anything? That's generally been the rule for corporate politicians and corporate media. If you can't kiss their ass, don't write it. Don't write it. Don't let anybody know Manchin takes made $5 million profit from coal. Shh. That's for TYT, they're radicals. They actually do news and facts. And in this case, Colin Powell, I mean, look, he also authorized torture, disaster, let alone what he did that was horrific in the Reagan administration. So, but on the other hand, Trump is not a bright guy. So you have to confess that. Like, you don't, it's not how you write it.
I know, Cenk, but like, do you understand how much that type of communication appeals to a huge portion of the country?
I know what's so frustrating, honestly, is we do plain talk, and you don't have to be dumb to do plain talk. You could actually have a smart conversation, but you could say it in a way that people can understand it. And by the way, I don't think you're that smart if you talk in a way that no one can understand. Then obviously you're not getting it. You're not understanding how to reach people, right? So I'm not against that at all. But there's this giant double standard by the media. If the right wing does plain talk, even in criticizing it, but they'll amplify it, but Trump was always considered super legitimate. Remember in 2016?
Oh, come on, Cenk.
He got
you lose me. This is where you lose me.
But Anna,
the media
no, you're totally
never
wrong.
took him seriously, with the exception of right-wing media.
No.
Okay, give me an example.
No, hold on. There's a giant. They said they gave him over $1 billion of free coverage in the primaries alone. Hold on. If a progressive ran, if Nina Turner ran as an example, right? Let alone Bernie Sanders, who was the most accomplished progressive in history, and back in 2015, he got zero coverage from the press. Nearly zero.
Because they're afraid of him and what he represents, Cenk.
That's my point.
But
that's my point.
They weren't afraid of Trump. They thought Trump was a clown, which is why they gave him so much free coverage. They thought it was entertaining. They thought it was funny.
Even if they thought that you had the biggest progressive clown in the world and they could rail on him, etc., they would do that for 1 second. I've seen it happen. And then they say, shh, never cover the progressives, never cover. Look, we just did a story earlier in this show where progressives were allowed on CNN and everyone's like, whoa, what the hell's going on, right? So right-wing lunatics can say anything they want and they get billions of dollars in free media coverage. Progressives can't break through. And so this is what leads to the uneven playing field. That's why and in this case, in this story, that's why you almost never hear the downside of the bureaucrats in Washington who've killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. And by the way, you're not gonna hear that from the right wing or Donald Trump. He's like, I don't like him. He told people to vote against me. I don't like him. Did he ever talk about, hey, the death squads in Central America that Colin Powell was helped to aid and abet?
No,
did he talk about the hundreds of thousands of dead civilians that Trump and the right wing don't care about at all? But that never makes it into the goddamn press because they're obsessed with the right wing, corporate. Sorry, go.
Okay, well, the New York Times did write about Colin Powell's role in covering up the My Lai massacre, and that was right after his death. So they do cover things like that. But again, look, I just want to go back.
They'll never mention it again.
Ugh.
Never. Go ahead, turn on cable news
right now.
Turn on cable news, see if you'll see one unkind word about Colin Powell or the My Lai massacre. Never. This is the same thing that we did earlier in the show. CNN shows you a poll where, not a poll, but a number where in West Virginia, only 3% of people work in coal. Well, so it's all a fiction. Then they go on and ask Manchin about that, the other senators about that? No, never.
You're right about that, but you're conflating a bunch of different things into like one talking point. Again, I just want to go back to Trump versus Bernie. Do you understand the difference? Do you understand that the message, the fundamental message coming from progressives like Bernie Sanders threatens their profits, threatens their profit motive? They don't want to popularize those ideas and those proposals. Whereas with Trump, I mean, TV executives were pretty brazen about it. They were pretty transparent about it. Trump brought in the ratings, and they genuinely didn't think Trump had any possibility of winning. So they're like, win-win. We've got a sideshow, we've got a clown. Why don't we give this clown endless coverage? It helps our ratings. There's no chance he's gonna win. They weren't threatened by Trump. That was the issue. They didn't take him seriously.
Anna, we're agreeing. We're getting upset over nothing because that's exactly what I'm saying, except the only thing I'm layering on top of that, of course they're not, that's my whole point, is that they're not covering progressives because it threatens their profits. And they're giant multi-billion-dollar corporations. The only thing I'm layering on top of that is we could get the biggest celebrity you've ever seen. And if they were a true progressive, all of a sudden, after the initial blast, the media would cover them less and less. So
yeah, because their incentives are to cover them less and less. Progressives are a threat to their profit motive.
Then we're agreeing 100%.
Okay.
And that's why the mainstream media sucks.
Well, it's run like a private business is supposed to be run. This is how private businesses are run. This is how it works.
They're actually a public company.
Yeah, they're publicly traded, but you know what I mean.
I know what you're saying. Do they go out and tell their audience, by the way, oh, by the way, we're a public corporation listed on the stock market. We have fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit. So from now on, you'll only hear right-wing corporate talking points, and we will cover up all progressives and make sure they do not get it on air, because then you might actually believe them. In fact, you already do believe them. We cover that up too. We have poll after poll showing that 2/3 of Americans agree with progressives, but we'll never ever air them because we're a for-profit company and we're not manufacturing news, we're manufacturing consent. If they gave that disclaimer every time they went on television, I'm good with it. Then hey, truth in advertising, we're all good to go, right? But they never say that. Instead, they go, oh, we are objective journalists. I do declare, we are objective. Corporations are awesome. The status quo is the best. And progressives, they're radicals. And they should be, outsiders have no credibility. They should not be allowed. So screw them and the horse that and the corporate horse that they rode in on.
All right, that does it for hour one. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
Well, the Young Turks, the Friday show is gonna be awesome. We're gonna help us over here. Drop it. We became the first ever daily online web television show.
No, the Constitution is the very core of America. The fact that we don't spy on American citizens, that we get a warrant, that we go to a judge, that we have a procedure, that we have due process, that is America.
On top of it, they go, why don't they just stay at their own schools? You gotta realize something. These schools suck. They want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots.
He lit these fires in trash bins all around town out of frustration.
99th most viewed channel today on YouTube.
The Shorties Award.
Best web host.
We passed 1 billion views. Voice Award winner, news and information channel, The Young Turks. Oh, another Webby.
The Young Turks.
Can I curse? Yeah! For those of you watching on live stream, yes, we have adopted a pet iguana that showed up at our door.
Haunted version in the dark with our silhouettes.
Now let's get to the best line of the debate. And it was definitely the one against Williams.
I told you we were coming.
When you talk about it, when it becomes a problem. Our lack of gun control is a problem.
Nonsense BS story is hurting that cause, and they need to wake up and recognize that they are being had by these people.
Biggest gang in America. Question is, how do we make sure that we blame the person who is dead? What kind of democracy is that?
We should never forget that the most powerful people in the world exploited the greatest tragedy in American history to go to war in a country that had a lot of oil.
Rolling thunder. That's what this show is.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy. Tick-tock. I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency. Tick-tock.
And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock, and we're gonna run you out of town, and we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country.
November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
That's how you do when I smacked it back that I like.
Say hi to the camera.
I don't like this.
Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and also Tom Baker, Kraken, Mackenzie J. Allman, all just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. And now that the Kraken's been released, well, we're all good then. Kraken's on our team now. Okay, go.
You know, I've been using the Too Strong coffee mug.
Oh, good.
Thought you'd give me a little love for that.
Oh, I did. Thank you. I didn't notice, but I'm glad you pointed it out. TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT.
Not a big deal. All right, let's completely switch gears now and talk a little bit about this insane case in Alabama. A former Alabama pastor who raped and impregnated a 14-year-old girl will serve no time behind bars because he took a plea deal. He was 24 years old when he raped a 14-year-old girl and impregnated her. Now, the story has some more twists and turns, but it's just absolutely disgusting. Jason Greathouse is the name of the pastor. He used to minister in Enterprise, Alabama, but now lives in Tennessee. He reached a deal with the Coffee County District Attorney's Office on Thursday that downgrades his charge from second-degree rape, a felony, to contributing to the delinquency of a minor, a misdemeanor, according to court records. Just to give you a sense of what would fall under the category of delinquency of a minor, if you bought liquor for a minor, for instance, that's considered contributing to the delinquency of a minor. A little different from raping a minor. Okay, now Greathouse, a resident of Hendersonville, Tennessee, agreed to serve 2 years of unsupervised probation for the 2018 incident, which occurred when he was 24. And by the way, it's not a 2018 incident. It happened in 2008, to be specific. That's a typo by AL.com. So it happened in 2008. It occurred when he was 24 years old and the victim was 14. The pastor also does not have to register as a sex offender under the agreement's terms. Now, how did this all happen? First of all, how was this plea deal even offered to him? Well, district attorney seems to have quite a bit to do with this. Tom Anderson is his name. And here's a statement that he made when the press was asking about it. He said, there were extenuating circumstances that would have been allowed to be presented by the defense that very likely could have resulted in a mistrial or even a not guilty verdict by jury nullification. Why? What's the argument there? Well, the girl was raped when she was 14, back in 2008. A year later, she divorced him. Oh, I said divorced. Did they get married? Her family forced her to marry him when she was 14 years old. A year later, she decided to divorce him, which I'm sure was an incredibly difficult thing to do, but she had the baby. And so she wants full custody of the child, which I think she should absolutely get, considering the fact that the father of the child is literally a rapist. But the argument here by the defense is, well, she's accusing him of rape because she wants full custody of the child. But he raped her. The evidence is the child that she had when she was just 14 years old. How insane is this story?
Yeah, it actually reminds me of a story we did a couple of years back about this tradition still happening in the Central Asian republics. I forget if it was Tajikistan or not, but it was one of those republics. And there was an old nomadic tradition where they would go and kidnap a girl that they liked and rape her. And then the family members and the parents of the girl would come over once this had happened and force the girl to marry her rapist, okay? Jesus. And we talked about how what a horrific old cultural relic this was and how you can't do this, obviously, in the modern world. But we don't have to go all the way to Tajikistan. We have it right here in Alabama. So that actually happened. 14 years old. And you know, and we were doing this, somebody was pitching this story in the production meeting and I missed the state and I asked, it's a southern state, right? Now, why did I ask that? To make fun of the South? No, because that's where the tradition is. Marrying off girls who were sexually abused at 14, 15, 16 years old. And at the time, it was legal in Alabama for the parents to go and consent to that marriage.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
So Alabama has since changed its laws, which now indicate that in order to get married at 16, that's the age. You have to be at least 16. You would need your parents' consent to get married. At 18, of course, you're considered an adult. You can get married without parental consent. But back then, in 2008, when this rape occurred, a 14-year-old could, in fact, be forced into marriage if the parents force it to happen and give the consent to the state.
And so Roy Moore was charged with molesting younger girls in the state of Alabama, right? And what happened? A giant chunk, that could happen anywhere, by the way. I'm not saying that it's purely a southern or a red state thing. There's predators all over the country and all over the world, right? But in Alabama, he got a giant percentage of the vote, where a lot of people thought, you know what, sexually abusing 15-year-olds, not that big a deal. And so here we have it. So that's one aspect of it. We have our own American Taliban, and that's part of the culture, and it sucks. And it shouldn't be. And ironically, a lot of those people will then turn around and become QAnon supporters and blame Democrats for running child sex trafficking rings. Okay, now the other side of this is the religion angle here. A pastor did it.
He was her youth pastor.
Yeah, no, look, guys, be super careful. I hate to say this, and it's not just about religion, but anywhere where your kids are, be super duper careful. That's where child molesters go. And why do they go to the church so much? Because they were right next to the kids and they had unquestioned authority. And the church would constantly cover up for them, as a matter of course. Look, earlier this month, a report came out of France. Over 70 years, you know how many children were sexually abused by the church just in France? Just the Catholic Church, just in France. 70 years is a long time, so 700, 7,000? No, 330,000 kids. They sexually abused 330,000 kids. Why? Because that's part of honestly, when you look at it that way, you think that's part of the point. Let's set up a nonsense organization, say that there's a God somewhere up in the sky, and then no one can question us. Let's invite a bunch of young children and make sure their parents aren't around. And then if anybody ever questions us, say, no, the man in the sky told us we could do it, and you're not allowed to question us. So here's a pastor in Alabama. Oh, God, this, that, the other thing. Give me your 14-year-old. So if you want to know where the child molesters are, it's not complicated. We know exactly where they are. And Catholic Church leadership is a massive, massive center for it. And unfortunately, other leaders and other religions as well. And by the way, religious fundamentalists in places like Afghanistan, what do? Same exact thing. When are you gonna get it through your heads that religious leaders are not in it for morality? They're not on your side. Not all of them, some of them are wonderful, but a giant percentage of them are the bad guys. They're not looking to fight evil, they are evil.
And when it comes to certain people, especially those who are tied to religious organizations, they get away with this kind of behavior. They get away. This is rape. A 14-year-old cannot consent to having sex with a 24-year-old, okay? It's considered rape, period. There's evidence of that rape, but the justice system, in this case, protected the rapist. That's what they did. And imagine she has to deal with him because he still has partial custody of that child. She has to deal with her rapist on a regular basis.
But technically, the state of Alabama says he's not a rapist.
It's disgusting.
And so he has full rights.
All right, let's move on. So, you know how all those right-wing governors wanted to ban vaccine mandates? Not working out so well for them. A Texas bill meant to block COVID-19 vaccine mandates for employers has failed in the state legislature because it turns out that the business community actually really likes vaccine mandates. So let me give you the details. The Texas House's version of the bill was unable to muster enough support to be voted out of committee. The Senate's proposal, pushed by Senator Brian Hughes, was quickly pushed out of committee, but did not have the votes for approval by the whole chamber. Now, why? Turns out that more than 24 medical, I mean, they don't really care that much about the medical, but business advocacy groups quickly criticized SB 51, pushing back against the legislation in the days after it was introduced last week. Hughes filed the bill after Texas Governor Greg Abbott asked lawmakers last week to take up the issue to ensure Texans aren't required to get vaccinated, saying that vaccines are safe, effective, and our best defense against the virus, but should remain voluntary and never forced. Well, the business community disagrees with that because they don't have liability protection. So if a bunch of their workers end up getting sick with COVID, if some of their workers die as a result of COVID spreading in the workplace, well, they're susceptible to lawsuits, which they don't want to deal with. And of course, they want to get workers back into the workplace, and they want to make sure that their workers are healthy in order to do their job. So they love vaccine mandates. In fact, that was a common topic of conversation when I debated Ben Shapiro over at the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce. They were pretty transparent about the fact that they favored vaccine mandates. So now it's fascinating to see these right-wing governors, kind of waver or struggle to find their next COVID-related culture war issue to delve into because they don't want to go against their corporate donors. They don't want to go against the business community. The business community wants the vaccine mandates.
So there's this funny guy, State Senator Kel Seliger from Amarillo. And he's got two quotes that I like. So now they were all tough guys, right? Oh yeah, well, no mandates in Texas. Texas is about freedom, okay? We're not gonna allow any stinking mandates in Texas, right? And then Seliger says, quote, we're getting a tremendous amount of communications from the business community saying that this is their job. They set the rules and working conditions in their place of business. So all of a sudden, freedom went out the window. Nobody gives a damn about freedom when the guys giving you campaign contributions all of a sudden show up and just go, hey, Seliger, Patrick, Abbott, Cruz, all of you down in Texas, I think you forgot who the boss is. We're the boss. You shut up and do as you're told. And so then Seliger says, I've got some real reservations. Oh, he does now. All of a sudden he's got reservations. So I got some real reservations because I think it's another example of big government. Oh, that's hilarious. So wait, you didn't want the vaccines being mandated because that was big government. And now you're saying they should be mandated by business because otherwise it'd be big government. Which one is it?
It's amazing.
They just flipped the talking point on its head.
Yeah, exactly.
Because they don't care. It's a punchline to them. Oh God, I feel so sad for the Republican voters because they think you're such schmucks. All they have to do is say #freedom. And you go running like a puppy dog. No. So they go, oh yeah, vaccine mandates suck. You go, oh, freedom. They say, oh, help big business do mandates on you. Freedom. Wait, what? And they don't even say, wait, what? They don't even say it. It's so sad.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. The government implementing vaccine mandates to keep you healthy and safe, bad. That's bad. But your boss enforcing vaccine mandates because he wants you back in the mines, that's good. That's essentially what they're saying. They don't want to go against the business community. So again, they're realizing now, damn, now I got to figure out what the next COVID-related culture war issue is going to be, because I got to deflect or distract my voters or constituents from anything related to the economy and how we're screwing them over. That's really what's happening here. And by the way, I love the point that you just mentioned, Cenk, because you go over to Arkansas and you see something very similar with Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson, who was asked a decent question by Chuck Todd. So let's hear what the question is and how he responded to it.
We got some evidence here that mandates work. Let me show you some statistics in your state. On August 1st, 36% of the state was fully vaccinated. After the vaccine mandate was announced, and you had companies like Tyson's and Walmart in your state essentially announced their own vaccine mandates, vaccine acceptance went up 30%, got 46% of the state now. Is that not evidence that the mandates by Tyson's and Walmart have had an impact?
Well, absolutely, it does indicate that, and it's not just there, but our healthcare workers, many of our hospitals have put in a requirement for vaccines, and the rate goes up. So yes, there is an effectiveness there. And so let me make it clear that when I say I don't believe we ought to be engaging in mandates, I'm speaking of the government mandates, whether it's a federal government mandate or a state government mandate. And the states are sometimes coming in and saying employers should not have the ability to impose a vaccine requirement on their workers.
That was amazing.
No, but guys, understand the extra layer of absurdity. The biggest part of the federal mandate was saying government workers have to get vaccinated.
Exactly.
Now, when you say, okay, Walmart workers have to get vaccinated, they go, that's awesome. Federal workers, same exact situation. Your boss saying, federal workers, awful. I can't believe they took their freedom away. They took their freedom away. Your stinking boss tells you to get vaccinated and now you got to. This is an outrage. Walmart does the same exact thing. They're like, bravo. Way to go, Walmart. That's how you take freedom away. Which leads to more freedom.
And remember, Biden's vaccine mandate mostly only applied to government workers, right? They're the ones who actually had an effective vaccine mandate. They couldn't opt out unless there were very specific health reasons or maybe even religious reasons. But in terms of the OSHA component of it, it only applied to companies with 100 employees or more, and employees could still opt out as long as they submit to regular COVID testing. But they could still opt out. It wasn't in any way a generalized vaccine mandate impacting everyone. So they were against what Biden was doing, but now all of a sudden they're totally in favor of private companies implementing their own vaccine mandate.
It's the same thing. It's the boss telling the workers you have to get vaccinated. Remember the guy yelling at Lindsey Graham saying, I work at the military now, and they're telling me because of the federal government I got to get vaccinated. But if you worked at Walmart, the same exact thing would happen. And then that same dumbass would turn around and go, yeah, that's right, man. I'm so glad my boss at Walmart made me get vaccinated. Way to mandate it, because that means freedom. Look, guys, I'm asking you, I'm not telling you you're unintelligent, I'm asking you. Look, I know why your politicians do it. If you didn't get it by now, every Republican politician is owned by corporations. They donate to them and then they own them. Don't you know that? Wasn't that what Drain the Swamp was about? So now are you gonna be against the Walmart mandates and rip into Texas Republicans and Arkansas Republicans? Or are you gonna realize, you've been had, you've been duped. There was nothing wrong with mandates in the first place. All these guys work for the people who sign their checks. It's all about corruption. If you're looking for who rigged the system, don't look down, look up. And in the case of government, it's not that big government owns big business. That's not, you got it completely backwards. Big business owns big government. okay? And they tell whether it's Democratic politicians or Republican politicians, shut up, boy, and do as you're told. And you just saw it with the guys who claim to be the toughest conservatives in the country, Texas Republicans. And the minute the corporations said, sit down and do as you're told, they said, and they did exactly as they were told. So that's who those bitches are.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about Dennis Prager and his COVID positive status. He claims he did it on purpose. We'll give you the details on that and more. Don't miss it.
So next Tuesday's the end of the month. That's when we do Ask Me Anything. So right after the May show at 8 o'clock Eastern, we're gonna do Anna and I are gonna do Ask Me Anything. So submit your questions now. Go to the community tab on YouTube if you're a member, and submit your questions for our Ask Me Anything. Okay, we got a new show starring Francesca Fiorentini. You guys are gonna love it. It's at Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern. It's on Twitch, twitch.tv/TYT, and it's called a Twitchuation Room. I'm trying my best. And immediately following the bonus episode tonight is Woznia, same place, twitch.tv/TYT. Woznia Lambre is awesome, hilarious, and brilliant. And also on Twitch, World's Spiciest Chip Challenge. If by the end of the month, we're at 6,200 subscribers. Brett Ehrlich, Jordan Yule, and others will have the Pocky Chip Challenge, the One Chip Challenge. And if we get to 7,000 subscribers, I will do it as well. Now, new members on YouTube, Bernard Francis and Russell Hate It. You guys are awesome. Thank you for being part of TYT. You make a huge difference. What's the antimatter writes in the member section? Progressives threaten their profits because progressivism and corporate rule, capitalism, are incompatible. Yes, corporatism and progressivism are as close to diametrically opposed as you can get. And Genie says, we all know mainstream investigative journalism is dead. It's only alive at indie media like TYT. Gene, thank you. That's unfortunately true. And you guys helped to put together our investigative team in the first place. So everything here is thanks to the members. Mitter Binion said, hanging out with TYT and some ice cream. Is it my birthday? I guess. So happy birthday. Alex Mammon, thank you so much for the generous contribution on Super Chat. Really, really appreciate it. Ethan Garul writes in, I saw a video of Ryan Grimm on Chris Hayes discussing Kristen Sinema and the fact that only people she speaks to are her donors. I was honestly shocked by how much they talked about corruption. Nice to see. And look at that. The people talking real talk on cable news now. Nina Turner, TYT host, Ryan Grimm, TYT contributor. I love that they're breaking through, and I love that they're allowed on television and then say what they say. By the way, if you're watching real journalists and real media, talking about corruption in American politics shouldn't be the exception, it should be the rule. It is sad that on the so-called left-wing network at MSNBC, it's literally shocking to you when they talk about corruption. And that's only because the TYT contributor was on. He's of course also Intercept's Washington bureau chief and doing a brilliant job there. Dr. Zippy McScoots said 330,000 kids. I live in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We only have 220,000 people in our whole city. Yeah, take that and multiply it by another 50%, and that's how many kids the Catholic Church sexually abused in France. Sawya, Dream Waver Dragon both gave 1,000 bits, and Trimu Batiki gave 300 bits on Twitch. We love you for it. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Jen and Anna with you guys. We got more news.
Conservative talk show host Dennis Prager has tested positive for coronavirus. But for those of you who are concerned, maybe he didn't want to contract the virus, just know that he did this intentionally. He went out of his way to be around people without a mask in an effort to contract the virus because he genuinely thinks that natural immunity against the virus is better than getting vaccinated. So let's hear what he had to say.
It is infinitely preferable to have natural immunity than vaccine immunity. And that is what I hoped for the entire time. Hence, I so engaged with strangers, constantly hugging them, taking photos with them, knowing that I was making myself very susceptible to getting COVID, which is indeed, as bizarre as it sounded, what I wanted, in the hope that I would achieve natural immunity and be taken care of by therapeutics. That is exactly what has happened. It should have happened to the great majority of Americans. The number of deaths in this country owing to COVID is a scandal, which one day will be clear to Americans.
Anna, are we sure he survived?
I don't know.
He looked like death warmed over there.
Yeah, he looked pretty bad. But to be fair, he usually looks pretty bad.
Yeah, he's like, my getting COVID has been a success. I'm fairly devastated, but I think I'm gonna recover eventually from natural immunity. Now, by the way, look, natural immunity is a form of immunity if you already
survive it.
Yeah. And so if you had COVID and you survived, you do build up a certain amount of immunity. You can get it again, but then the next case will be less severe. So that one is not made up, right? So with the right wing, we have to point out anytime they have not made up a fact, right? But you have to survive it first. That guy's 73 years old. He's nuts, let alone the fact that it is not better because COVID also does long-term damage to some people in some portions of health. For example, the lung damage is the #1 area. Does it happen to everyone? No. Does your age matter? Yes. But does it happen to a significant chunk of people? Yes, definitely. So you can do long-term damage to yourself while trying to get natural immunity. Getting the vaccine is a way better way to go, and especially if you're 73. And we haven't even gotten to how much he's endangered other people.
Right, exactly. Okay, I'll get back to that in a second. But let me just also note that he has access to therapeutics that many Americans do not have. And what do I mean by therapeutics? I'm talking about the monoclonal antibodies, Regeneron. I'm talking about the steroids that he can get. Now, there are Americans who don't have health insurance or they have inadequate health insurance that doesn't cover those treatments. So while they might end up hospitalized, while they might end up spending a lot of money out of pocket or going bankrupt for those therapeutics, just understand that Dennis Prager is in a very different financial position compared to other Americans who can easily protect themselves from coronavirus by getting vaccinated, right? So what he's doing here is so dangerous because he's discouraging people from getting vaccinated, encouraging people to intentionally get infected with coronavirus. And by the way, while he was in the process of getting infected with coronavirus himself, I mean, he's out there, he's hugging people, he's taking pictures. Did those fans of his, did those supporters of his know that he was in the process of doing something incredibly irresponsible and could have potentially spread the virus to them as they were taking photos and doing things like that? I mean, but who cares about them, right? It's all about Dennis Prager and and I don't even really understand what his incentives are in pushing this notion that people should not get vaccinated and instead should go out there and purposely get sick with coronavirus to build natural immunity. I don't really understand what that incentive is. But I also want to know one other thing. He claimed to have been taking all sorts of prophylactics, all sorts of nonsense that was pushed out by kooks like ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, things that have not been proven as preventative measures against coronavirus and have not been proven as treatments to help recover from coronavirus. So if he was taking those preventative measures, how did he contract the virus? Looks like the prophylactics that he's been slanging to his viewers and his listeners didn't really work, huh?
Yeah, that's interesting because half the things on the list were things that are supposed to prevent you getting from COVID. But there we are again, in the right-wing world where facts are totally irrelevant. So people will look at that and go, oh, great. That means if you take the ivermectin, you won't get coronavirus. But if you do, you'll be perfectly fine. It doesn't have to make logical sense.
Okay, then
it just doesn't have to. They don't care.
If that's the case, why did you need monoclonal antibodies? If ivermectin was such a great treatment for coronavirus, why did Joe Rogan also do steroids and monoclonal antibodies? He threw the kitchen sink at it, as he said himself. So that's the thing, if they're genuine in really believing that ivermectin is an effective treatment, an effective therapeutic against COVID, then why'd you take all those other things? Why didn't you cut all that other stuff out and just take ivermectin? See how that works out for you. Just curious why they didn't do that.
Yeah. So look, they're endangering their own viewers and listeners in a couple of different ways. First of all, in Prager, when he says, I hugged a bunch of people. Well, which one gave you COVID? Was it the second person you hugged, the 17th person you hugged? How many people did you hug after you got COVID in your experiment that you didn't tell them about? What a monster. And then, by the way, take all these different drugs. If you're a normal person in America, they'll bankrupt you because your insurance probably won't cover all of them. And so you'll listen to me and then you'll go and try to get these antibodies and you'll find out it's super expensive and that you're not as rich as Joe Rogan and Dennis Prager. And then you'll be out of luck. Too late, you already got it. And now you can't treat it anyway because you don't have enough money and your insurance doesn't cover it. And by the way, who brought you that brutal system? Our corporate sponsors over at PragerU. PragerU gets $20-25 million every single year for free. So Joe Rogan at least makes his own money. Okay, Prager is nothing but a propagandist for his donors. And then JR used to joke off air. Look, right wing's getting worse and worse. With COVID, at first they were like, it's no big deal, it's gonna disappear. Well, it didn't disappear, it's a big deal, but it's Antifa. I'm kidding, but that's
Not
coming
really,
next, right? But don't worry about it, don't protect yourself. And he joked, next thing that they'll do is they'll say, you should get it. You should actually get it. And you know how I used to joke on air, but they're gonna smear it all over themselves. We're at that stage. We're at late stage conservatism.
Oh my God.
Where you spread coronavirus all over yourself on purpose. He just did it. We just showed you the video, right? Just to show. And what is it all in service of? There's a bunch of other financial factors we've discussed in other clips, but the main cultural thing they're driving at here is macho men don't get vaccinated.
Yeah, because at this point, it's abundantly clear that corporate interests, business interests want vaccine mandates. They're implementing their own vaccine mandates within their own companies. So this is, at this point, just purely part of a culture war that they've manufactured, knowing full well that it's getting people killed. They don't care. Have they ever cared? These are the pro-life guys.
Yeah,
of course.
Over now nearly 725,000 dead, and their theory is all of them were not tough enough. They weren't manly enough. That's disgusting. Go tell that to the people who lost family members.
Or another thing is, they had other comorbidities. They're fat, they're not taking care of themselves. They just say it. They just say it, right?
Yeah.
It is kind of incredible how hundreds of thousands of Americans have died during this pandemic. They've certainly played a role in spreading disinformation and discouraging people from getting vaccinated. And then they turn around and add insult to injury by essentially smearing the very people who died from COVID by calling out their comorbidity, the fact that they're overweight, all sorts of stuff, right? Never take personal responsibility, always engage in the culture war, because that's all they've got. That's all they've got. And there's no bottom. There's no telling how low they'll go to engage in that culture war, even as they know people are dying as a result of it. It's anyway, I'm so sick of it.
And the last piece of irony here is, Alan West also got coronavirus. He's an extreme right winger in Texas. He came out of the hospital and he said, no, it's okay. I was not gonna give in to those big drug companies and take the vaccine. Who do you think makes ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and the monoclonal antibodies. They're all giant pharmaceutical companies.
No, Cenk, they're God-given. They rain from heaven down to the earth. And stupid. I mean, stupid. That's all you can say. But don't hurt Joe Rogan's feelings by noting that ivermectin is also used for livestock, because that's the real story. That's the important story.
Look, guys, I can't help but say, how can you think someone's smart when they say, it could also be used for humans, but for what, schmucks, for what? It could be used for tapeworm. It has nothing to do with coronavirus. You fell for that talking point? Jesus, man, do better.
All right, we got to take a break. When we come back, Meghan McCain talks about the toxic and hostile work environment she experienced over at The View. Do I feel a little bad for her? I don't know. You're gonna have to come back to find out.
Let's read member comments. Meg writes in, I love watching Nina Turner light up mainstream media, nothing better. Here. Joe writes in, so Trump just admitted he's horrible, and then he hopes that when he dies, everyone will pretend that he wasn't. That is kind of what he said in that Colin Powell statement. So it's good job in catching that. I hadn't quite thought of it that way, but it's true. Captain Cornball wrote in, Prager saying that he was trying to get COVID leads to three main possibilities. Number one, he's lying about trying to get it. Thank you for pointing that out. I forgot to mention that in the story. I think there's an excellent chance that he took the vaccine and he was trying to get coronavirus after taking the vaccine, full well knowing that it's a lot less severe. At 73 years old, swimming in donor money, if Prager really was unvaccinated and got COVID, he's a lot dumber than I thought he was. And so, I mean, I know he's not a good guy, but I didn't think he was that dumb. So I think my best guess would be he was lying, that he had been vaccinated earlier. Anyway, Captain Corbo points out possibility number two is he's so incompetent that it took him almost 2 years to get it, considering how many major Republicans managed it. And number three, even COVID didn't want to associate with Dennis Prager. Fair enough. Progressive Canuck, AKA Maple Syrup Dragon, wrote in, I missed TYT the last week and so happy I could make it home today for it. Been working 14 hours a day fixing a big corporate sawmill. I'm part of the problem for the climate change happening, but it pays the bills for half the year when the rest of the year is nothing. So look, a lot of folks are in that tight spot, and that's why we say the good news is the renewable energy jobs pay more, and there's a lot more of them. Now I know you're in Canada, but in America, and it's probably true in Canada too, but there's way more renewable jobs. I forgot the exact number, but it's like something like 10 or 13 times more than coal jobs. But our media and our politicians are still obsessed with the coal mythology because it helps them sell the oil companies propaganda.
Can I just note something real quick?
Yeah.
Because I'm losing my mind. So our team clipped out a tiny little part of the segment we did about just 3% of employees in West Virginia working in coal.
Yeah.
Posted it on Twitter, and one of the first comments is, you know that coal is a massive part of West Virginia's economy, don't you? No, but the video is like 30 seconds long. Just watch the video. No, it's only 3%.
Yeah.
But they don't care. No one. By the way, people on our side, like Twitter is just like, post anything. Roses are beautiful. No, roses are not beautiful. That's what Twitter is. That's all Twitter is. Okay, it's all contrarian BS, nonstop.
Yeah.
The sky is blue. No, it is not. How dare you? You're corrupt.
And have you thought about the people who can't see the sky? There's always something.
No, I can't take it anymore.
Okay, we'll be back.
Can't take it anymore.
back on TYT, Jen Canana with you guys.
You guys want to be members. If ever you want to be members, today is the day. Because the bonus episode, I'm bringing the fire.
Oh.
Okay, I'm bringing the fire.
I'm a fan of the fire.
I've got a lot to say.
Okay.
I'm gonna save it for the members. But for now, let's talk about Meghan McCain.
TYT.com/join.
All right, so Meghan McCain's got a book coming out because of course she does. So in her new book, Bad Republicans, Meghan McCain talks about the hostile and toxic work environment that she experienced over at The View. Now, before you roll your eyes, just wait until I give you the quotes and then judge for yourselves whether or not you feel any sympathy for her. Because to be honest, I felt a little tiny bit of sympathy, even though I disagree with her wholeheartedly on her politics and also her just overall demeanor. With that said, she writes in her book, you can't imagine how it messes with your self-esteem working in an environment where the worst thing you can be in the world is a Republican during the Trump years. As the country got worse under Trump, the treatment from Whoopi, Joy, and some of the staff grew meaner and less forgiving. So far, I'm not with her. So far, all I can think about is the fact that she landed a role on a show where she's making millions of dollars, not based on merit, not based on hard work, but based on the fact that she's the daughter of a former, now late senator. That's it. So far, not buying it. Let me continue though. It was as if I had become an avatar for everything they hated about the president. That's not it. It felt like the co-hosts and staff only knew one Republican, me, and took out all their anger on me, even though I didn't even vote for Trump. Now, of course, she's dismissing all of the unbearable things that she would say on that show. She seemed to have no problem demonizing the left, demonizing progressives especially. But whenever she got some of that treatment back in return, she would make a big deal about it as if she was some sort of victim, some sort of powerless person. But again, she's a person who landed that role based on her family ties and has a lot more power than the vast majority of Americans. So far, it just seems like weepy tears that don't make much sense, okay? Now,
here.
Let's go on to what she had to say about Whoopi. I found her open disdain for me more and more difficult to manage as the years went on and it became more frequent. Occasionally, if the show's political discourse veered into territory that she found disagreeable, Whoopi would cut me off, sometimes harshly. McCain also recalled a particularly difficult day in December of 2019 at The View, when Whoopi Goldberg told her, girl, please stop talking right now. She started to cry during our conversation.
That's what the reporter says about Meghan McCain.
Yeah.
So I want to reserve all my comments because I'm really split on two parts of this. One part I have a lot of sympathy for, and another part I have no sympathy for. But Anna, get through all of her complaints, and then we'll talk about what's legitimate and not.
So the last straw for her was Joy Behar and a very specific moment, okay? McCain writes, she decided that she had to leave The View on January 5th, her second day back from maternity leave. McCain had given birth to her daughter, Liberty, in September of 2020. And she was suffering from severe postpartum anxiety, which by the way is no joke, okay? Postpartum depression and anxiety is really, really difficult. So I wanna just really emphasize that. Now, during a political debate that day, McCain made a joke about how Joy Behar, the show's resident liberal, must have missed her when she was gone. Behar scowled at her. I did not miss you, Behar said, 0. Now we have a video from that moment. I wanna show you the video so you guys can kind of see how it all went down and then we can discuss.
You missed me so much when I was on maternity leave. You missed me so much. You missed fighting with me. Don't act like you missed fighting with me.
I did not miss you.
Okay, somebody answer the question.
Can I weigh in?
Or I'm
you know what? That's
moving
so nasty.
I'd like to weigh in.
That's so nasty.
Can I weigh in?
Okay, guys,
rude. Like,
hold
really?
on. Stop. Everybody stop.
That's so rude.
Now, McCain said that she sobbed during the commercial and had a panic attack after the show wrapped, vomiting in her office. Overcome by her own anxieties as a new mom, she realized she couldn't keep doing The View given how toxic the job had become for her and her family. She left the show in August. So that last part, I do feel sympathy for her because like I remember that moment too. And I do think Joy Behar went a little too far. You can tell Meghan McCain was jokey. She was trying to keep it light. And I don't know, I felt like Joy Behar needlessly was like, no, didn't miss you. It's fine if you didn't miss her, but like live on air, I get it gets heated with political debate, but that moment I think, it sucks. It would suck for anyone.
Yeah, no, I'm not buying that one, to be honest. So we don't have quotes on it, but she talked about something else that I had sympathy for, which was the nonstop leaks. And so that really sucks. And so then they're picking apart what did she say off air to this person, to that person? Was she mean? Was she cold? Was she this? And she says, look, you could have written that about anybody, but there was no leaks about the other ones. There was constant leaks about me. I believe her on that. And I think that is toxic and I think that sucks, okay? So I have sympathy for her on that. The rest of it, none, zero, okay? So first of all, if I was on a show like The Five on Fox News Channel, right? And I was away for a while and then they came back and they said, we didn't miss you. I would think that was the most natural thing I'd ever heard. In fact, I take it as a slight compliment.
I know, but that's you in your normal mental state. That's not you as a new mom who's going through postpartum depression. So don't minimize that.
No, I'm not minimizing it, but I think she's using it as an excuse. Now, I don't know, so you could say that's unfair, right? But why do I say that? I say it because she explains many different incidents before she was pregnant and after.
Yeah.
And each time she has the same exact reaction. Anytime anyone slightly criticizes her, ball of tears, I'm the victim, I can't believe that you guys are not forced by the state to agree with me. So you had all the tears and you had all the anxiety and all of that before you got pregnant. So to me, it seems like she's hiding behind that. If I'm wrong about it and she has some real clinical issues, then I'm sorry, because that's definitely real. It happens to real people who aren't on The View, right? But for her, every time she's criticized, she melts. Well, that's not how it works. You got paid a ton of money to stand up for your position. Yes, you're right. There were more people nominally on the left, right? A lot of them are establishment, but Sunny Hostin's pretty good on the left, and Joy Behar is pretty good on the left, right? So yeah, there are people on the left and more people on the left. We grant you that. The job is to stand up to them. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. And by the way, she walked away because she's already incredibly wealthy. So not a lot of people are in that position. So every specific example she gave outside of the leaks, honestly, I had no sympathy for it at all. Here, I'll give an example of you.
It's funny that look, I think the leaks are wrong, especially since it was mostly leaks about her. But I also had experience with her, working with her. You know, she was the host of this show called Take Part Live. I would be a fill-in for that show oftentimes, or a guest host on that show oftentimes. I also was on 2 episodes of like a special she did back in the day. So I know what she's like behind the scenes, and I know the way she treats producers. I'm not excusing producers for leaking things, but I have no doubt that the producers despised her. And that's the reason why they would leak stuff about her. That's my opinion based on my personal experiences. You know, she tended to treat producers as if they were her personal servants. And so I have a little more understanding in regard to why that was happening. Again, not excusing it. So that's why that part didn't really stand out to me. But I think you can take the different accusations that she's making separately and make a judgment on them. And I do think like, look, Joy Behar, even though I tend to agree with her more often than not on that show, she didn't really need to go there. Like it went a little too far and it was needless.
No, it didn't. So what? So what? So the reason why I make a distinction with the leaks is not because of who she's treating, but because when you're in a workplace, there's an implied trust and it's a breach of the trust. Whereas when you're on air, you're in the arena. So Anna cuts me off sometimes, she did it today. I cut her off sometimes, I did it today. We don't then go, I can't believe this is a toxic work environment.
I know, but
it's
we
a talk
genuinely
show.
like each other.
No, okay, I'll give you examples.
It's a little different.
No, I'll give you, first of all, a lot of times we fight.
Well, what, you don't like me? I don't like you either, okay? I don't like you either.
That's it, toxic. Okay, so now, look, I'll give you examples from other places. So Anna went on a panel at Politicon a bunch of years ago. There was like 4 or 5 panelists who were all against her. So what? She took it like a champ and she fought back and she beat them all. You're in the arena. That's what you're supposed to do.
Not everyone's as strong, Cenk.
No, but seriously, guys, look, when Obama started doing corporate horse crap, I turned on him. And I didn't turn on him like, oh, I now hate him and this is personal. No, I just said these are the things he's doing well, but these are the things that honestly he's not doing well. That's not what he promised. And you know what happened? A world of hate rained down on me. The right wing already hated me. The establishment then turned on me, and a lot of good, well-meaning Democrats who've been brainwashed by cable news turned on me saying, no, Obama's the savior. Even when he does terrible things, you should kiss his ass. And they didn't frame it that way because they were told that no corporate politician could ever do anything wrong, and that I was the bad guy attacking Obama. With that world of pressure, did I say, oh, that's it, everything is toxic, I'm retiring? No, that's what we do here. We battle. They call it the battlefield of ideas. And I have sympathy for her for all the attacks on Twitter. I have sympathy for breach of trust, but I have no sympathy for what's going on air. It's your job to defend yourself and your position. That's literally what you get paid a ton of money to do.
Right, but look, I think that there's a certain amount of strength that a person has when they work really hard to do what people in this arena do, right? Like when you're passionate about it because you actually care about the issues, like you don't care about how nasty the debate can get. You don't care about how vicious the disagreements can get, as long as there's an understanding that all's fair in political debate, right? She fell into it because of what her name is. And so for her, it's all a game, right? She's going into it thinking like, but isn't this just all a game? This is what I'm doing because this is like my hobby. I don't need to do this. So when you're not like as invested and passionate about the issues, and you're met with the kind of debates that she was met with on that panel. And by the way, we're talking about The View. We're not even talking about like significant, like super informed political debate, right? She's like shocked by it and she considers it incredibly toxic.
And The View is so soft. I mean, if she had to deal with anything that anybody online deals with, I mean, she would have melted years and years ago. Look, to me, the whole thing reeked of entitlement. My last name is McCain. I'm owed everything. I'm supposed to get millions of dollars. And when I say absurd things, you're not supposed to push back. And I'm entitled to you liking me and treating me like a princess. And these women here who are accomplished on their own right didn't treat me as a princess. I am aggrieved.
Yeah, that is
zero sympathy.
No,
none.
That is her overall demeanor, right? I agree with you on that. Anyway.
Yeah, I see.
I'm just a softie when it comes to women who just had babies. Like it is hell, okay? I haven't done it mostly because I know it is hell. Like your hormones are going all over the place. You feel super vulnerable and super emotionally, for lack of a better word, like weak. You know what I'm saying? So just, it's okay to be nice to people you disagree with, like in certain moments. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, of course, and look, in that moment, if I was there, I would have wanted to comfort her because I'm a human being, right? And she's having an emotional moment there. But if it was the 28th time that I saw her crying in a row because someone slightly critiqued her, I'd be a little confused. Is it the mom thing? Or is it that you feel like you're entitled to have roses thrown at your feet 24/7? So anyways, that's Meghan McCain. All right, post game, the bonus episode, we got 2 fun things for you guys. First of all, Russia. We're gonna criticize Vladimir Putin, and what he did was both kind of despicable and
kind of hilarious.
Hilarious in its weakness, if you ask me. And so for all the Putin defenders out there, and get us on tape saying something mean about Putin, so you can go on there and go, oh my God, our beloved Putin has been criticized. Okay, so looking forward to that. And then Anna's gonna go off like she hasn't already, but she says she's super mad. So I don't know what that looks like, but you might wanna find out. So 3 different ways to join, at least tyt.com/join, that's easy. And hit the join button below if you're watching on YouTube, and learn how to do it for free on tyt.com/prime if you have Amazon Prime on Twitch. All right, one last thing. Guys, it's the 10th anniversary of Wolfpack. And so please go help the most righteous cause in the country, getting big money out of politics and ending corruption. Wolf-pack.org. wolf-pack.com/go. wolf-pack.com/go. We'll see you in the postgame.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was Too Strong Coffee? Yes, new, toostrongcoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right, and it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at toostrongcoffee.com/TYT.
300 million is a pretty good number, Well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day.
We looked at you like, are you nuts?
Young Turks has just passed another milestone. 15 billion views.
Damn. All right, lots of comments. You guys are the best.
I'm gonna read a few comments from our members.
Mr. Methuselah says on YouTube, super chat, thanks for all the important work you do for TYT for the movement.
Do you know who had the first super chat when I got back from vacation? You won't be surprised to find out. Rob Shively, what do you know? Rob says, rejoice for Dragon Daddy has returned.
This question sent to us by Izzy Sanchez Jr. Is it me or is Megan